Good morning, everyone. My name is Father Kyle Tietz. Today, the church celebrates the memorial of St. Anthony. And not that St. Anthony we're probably commonly familiar with, patron saint of lost articles, St. Anthony of Padua, but St. Anthony of the desert, or St. Anthony of Egypt. And St. Anthony was an early figure in the church who gave up his possessions, went out into the desert, and lived a life of solitude for a number of years. But after that, he formed an intentional community, and so we call him the father of monasticism, because he formed probably one of the first groups of monastic life, that communal life, that religious life that we celebrate. So we have him as an example for us today. And he lived a very ascetical life, a life of discipline and prayer and fasting. And we talk a little bit about fasting in the gospel today. Some people are wondering, they see the disciples of the Pharisees and the disciples of John and say, okay, those disciples do some fasting, but the disciples of Jesus aren't doing any fasting, so what's up with that? And Jesus says, how can my disciples fast when the bridegroom is here, right? And I think at the heart of this is saying, we need some reflection on our spiritual practices to see if they make sense, right? Fasting is a good thing. Fasting, prayer, and almsgiving help us grow closer to the Lord, and it's appropriate at certain times, right? But it doesn't make sense if Jesus is here, a time for celebration, a time for rejoicing. It doesn't make sense to fast at that time. So Jesus is saying it requires a little bit of reflection, and it doesn't make sense to fast when it's time for celebration. Likewise, it doesn't make sense to celebrate when it's a time for fasting. And I think St. Anthony has a few pieces of advice for us here too. He's got some collected sayings, and a lot of these are very good sayings of St. Anthony. So I'd encourage you to look at them too. Some of them are they're all pretty short and pretty simple. Some of them are a little intense, but he lived a pretty intense life, so that's two. But one of his pieces of sayings is this. Anthony also said, "Some have afflicted their bodies by asceticism, but they lack discernment, and so they are far from God." So he's saying, some people are doing some of these prayers, fastings, and things as well, but they haven't really discerned if it's a good idea, and in such a way, perhaps they're moving away from God. So I think it's an encouragement for us to say, okay, if I take up these spiritual practices, is it going to help me grow closer to God, right? Because there's so many devotions and types of fasting and prayers we could be doing, right? And it can be easy to say, well, I just got to do everything, or I just got to do this thing or that thing, right? But if it's not proper of our discernment, right? If it doesn't make sense, if it isn't going to help us grow closer to the Lord, it's probably not something for us. Just to offer you one other saying here of Anthony, just to give you a sense of some of these sayings here, a little kind of story. When the holy Anthony lived in the desert, he was beset by achadia. This is kind of like a spiritual sloth, kind of a lack of desire in prayer. And he was attacked by many sinful thoughts. He said to God, "Lord, I want to be saved, but these thoughts do not leave me alone. What can I do in my affliction? How can I be saved?" A short while afterwards, when he got up and went out, Anthony saw a man like himself sitting at his work, getting up from his work to pray, then sitting down again and working, then getting up again to pray. It was an angel of the Lord sent to correct and reassure him. He heard the angel saying to him, "Do this and you will be saved." At these words, Anthony was filled with joy and courage. He did this and he was saved. So just kind of a little story here, kind of a little saying, showing us the importance of prayer and work, prayer punctuating our day to help us to continue in our life with the Lord. So today we have a great example of St. Anthony for us, held up for us in encouragement in our spiritual life, that the spiritual life requires some discernment. Certainly Anthony's life of severe asceticism and living in the desert is not for everybody, right? But there's some discernment for us too. So when we take a new spiritual practice, when we're thinking about times of fasting, how can it be a way that's going to be pleasing to the Lord, help us grow closer to Him, and help us to rejoice once again when the bridegroom comes in the second coming of Jesus, and we all go out to rejoice with Him. God bless you. Have a great day.